All right, we are back. Obviously, me and JP switched sides really quickly. Don't worry, he hasn't gone anywhere. I'm just going to start this particular DVD off by covering some of the basics and fundamentals. And for all of you guys that have Gospel Keys 101, you'll know this, especially if you have Gospel Keys 102 as well. But it's the idea of being able to harmonize a melody because, number one, melodies come from scale. So if you know your basic scales, then the melody notes will generally come from that scale. They're not just thrown out and are random. Melody notes come from the scale. So therefore, Gospel Keys 101 taught you how to take every tone of the scale and put a harmonizing chord behind it. Now, for this particular DVD, JP is going to take you really far with the song Holy, 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 but I mean, he is going to tear it apart. I saw this cat play it this morning. I'm like, man, is this what they're going to learn by the end? And if that is the case, expect to be blown away. But everything that is, taken and made advanced starts with the basics. So that's what we're going to do here. Let's go to the key of D flat. You should know that the scale is, of course, D flat, E flat, F, G flat, A flat, B flat, C, D flat. I'm not going to repeat that. You should have done Fundamental Factory. Now we're going to teach you a chord to go with every tone of the scale. They're simple chords. They're triads. They're major and minor chords. Very simple, okay? Because if we had a melody like this, we want to be able to put the right chord behind it. See, that's the chord to go with F. That's the chord to go with E flat, You want to be able to do that. And that's what we're going to teach you how to do with the song Holy, Holy. So first things first, if your melody note is on the first tone of the scale, you're going to use a major chord. You're going to use the same major chord of that scale to harmonize it. So since the melody is D flat, and we're in the key of D flat, we're going to use this D flat major chord, which is F, A flat, D flat. Now here's the cool part. That same major chord that we use to harmonize the first tone of the scale, we can actually use that same major chord to harmonize other tones of the scale. Let me show you. So here's the chord that harmonizes the first tone of the scale. Well, if we take this F off the bottom and we actually put it on the top, lo and behold, A flat, D flat, F. This is going to be used to harmonize the third tone of the scale. Don't worry, I haven't skipped the second tone. I'll talk about it soon. So essentially, the same major chord is used to harmonize the first tone and the third tone. That's why if you notice in Mary Had a Little Lamb, this F right here, it's the same chord as here, See, same chord that you already learned. You do the same thing. Take this A flat off the bottom and put it on the top, and the same major chord, D flat, F, and A flat, it harmonizes the fifth tone of the scale. Now this is a special one because you can also use an A flat major chord. You can use the fifth tone as a major chord. But for the purposes of basic harmonization with the gospel method, we use this D flat major chord in root inversion. So you got D flat in first inversion, harmonizing the D flat. And you should know these chords. D flat in second inversion, harmonizing the F, which is the third tone of the scale. And D flat in root position, harmonizing the fifth tone of the scale. So you have three tones taken care of with one chord. How you like that? 3 in 1. Now, the 4 chord. So in any given key, you have a 4 chord. That's just 1, 2, 3, 4. So in the key of D flat, that's going to be G flat. Okay? And what you're going to do, you're going to use that in first inversion. Now, first inversion, remember, puts the key note on top. So since this is a G flat chord, we're going to put G flat on the top. So the chord is B flat, D flat, and G flat. That's a G flat chord. We're going to use that to harmonize the 4th tone of the scale. Okay? But we're going to do that same technique earlier. We're going to take our B flat off the top for the next chord. We're going to put it on the top. And look, we got the same G flat major chord, but now we're going to use that to harmonize the B flat, the 6th tone of the scale. So far you got the first tone taken care of, you got the 3rd tone taken care of, the 4th tone taken care of, you got the 5th tone taken care of, and you got the 6th tone taken care of with just how many chords? 2 chords. The last thing before the last chord, but the last major primary chord is the the 5. See, the 1, 4, and 5 are primary chords. They're very important. That's why they're used to harmonize the majority of the scale. So you got the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A flat is the 5th tone of the scale. And we're just going to use that in its second inversion. So you got E flat, A flat, and C. And simply that's going to harmonize the 7th tone of the scale. So you got the 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, and now you got the E flat, A flat, and C to harmonize the C. And the only last one is that 2nd tone of the scale. And the reason I skipped that is because it's going to be a minor chord. So you're just going to take the 2nd tone of the scale and you're going to use its real minor chord, okay? So the 2nd tone is E flat. We're just simply going to use an E flat minor chord to harmonize it. But keep in mind, we got to keep our melody note on top. So playing it like this doesn't work. We want this E flat on top. So we literally put it on top. You can play it down here as well. So G flat, B flat, and E flat is basically an E minor chord in 1st inversion. And that's going to harmonize our 2nd tone of the scale. So I know that was a lot, and I did it fast on purpose because I don't want to spend 30 minutes talking about this. I want you to play songs. Rewind that part. It's all basic chords. The idea is you got a melody, and if you think about that melody and what chord goes with that melody, whether it's the 1st tone of the scale, the 2nd tone, the 3rd tone, it has a chord to go under it. Literally, if this was soprano, this is alto, this is tenor, it's the same idea of taking voices. And a lot of the hymns were written for voices, not even written for the piano. So that's all we're doing is we're taking music, we're bringing it here. We're taking the melody and we're putting chords behind it. So let's just recap this one, and then I'll hand it over to JP to actually start Holy, Holy, Holy using these same exact chords. So 1st tone of the scale in any key, not just D flat, but in any key is going to be harmonized by the 1 major chord. And 1 in this key is D flat. It needs to be in 1st inversion. D flat needs to be on top. 2nd tone, E flat minor, but E flat needs to be on top. So that's 1st inversion. 3rd chord is going to be harmonized by the 1 major chord again. It's not going to be the E minor, not when you're harmonizing. It's not going to be the F minor, rather. Thought I was in the key of C. It's not going to be the 3 minor. It's going to be the actual 1 chord, but inverted so that the 3 is on top. The 4 chord is going to be major in 1st inversion, G flat major in this case. 5 chord is going to be the 1 chord again, just in root inversion this time. The 6 is going to be, it's going to be the same chord we used to harmonize the 4 major chord, but inverted to have the 6 on top. And the last chord is going to have the 5 chord is going to be the chord, but it's just going to be inverted. Okay? And all of these will be up on the screen. So you just practice these yourself and then come up with your own melodies. Like, just come up with a random melody. Like, if that was my melody, all I have to do is put the chords with every one of those melody notes. Okay? If I heard this in a song, I would go, and that is a song. You got that? See? So this could be used to learn a lot of the basic songs. What did I do? I took every tone that I taught you all the way down, and that's Joy to the World. So this is a basic way. This is not going to cover all of your songs. I mean, what do you think, JP? Probably like the more basic beginner hymns and stuff like that?
Well, I think more songs that are more melody-driven, and that's a lot of songs like hymns and things like that.
Right.
And songs, like Joy to the World and things like that.
Yeah.
But for the most part, basic harmonization, this is it.
But when we get down to that JP stuff, y'all, now what's going to happen is you're going to make a shift from this harmony, and you're going to see it before your eyes to a more chord progression focused way. And what do you think is the biggest difference from going from playing melody? Because you've had experience with different musicians, and a lot of musicians come from, like one guy might grow up doing all melody stuff, and you might clash with him because you're trying to do fat chord progressions. What's the difference?
Well, the difference, I think, is the more of a voicings approach and learning placement. And once you get basic harmonization, that's going to help you with different placements of chords, because you're not going to more so depend on the melody of the song. You're going to depend on the melody that you hear and how to voice your chords around the melodies that you want to hear or use that you hear in your head.
So in other words, you don't totally negate the harmonization techniques. You just work around it by finding the chords that work.
Exactly.
For example, when you're harmonizing with the D flat chord, the D flat, your bass is usually going to be D flat. When you're using the 4 chord, your bass is going to be 4 usually. And when you're using this 5 chord, your bass is going to be 5. So you can almost figure out what's going on in the song using the melody, because the melody will predict where your bass is supposed to go. But then you can take it further and use the patterns we're talking about. Like if the bass is going to the 5 because the melody goes, okay, the melody goes, that's a common hint to let you know, well, because the chord literally changes, that's a common hint to let you know we're going from the 1 to the 5. So you see how the melody can actually lead you to finding the chord progression, because if the melody is coming down, from D flat, for example, I'll take it to my piano, going from D flat down to C, well, that kind of lets you know if you're following these principles that, okay, we're going to use that D flat chord to harmonize it, and then we're going to use that A flat chord. So that's kind of letting you know, since these are primary chords, usually the bass moves with the primary chord. Sometimes it doesn't. If we kept our bass the same, it would clash. So your ear tells you to move. Now you can combine a more advanced approach and say, well, now that I know the melody has led me to play the 5 bass, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, now I use what I know from pattern paradise to say, what leads to the 5? What is the circle of fifths? What leads to A flat? Well, E flat. So keeping my melody, well, now I can switch out my chords. I can try maybe an E flat dominant 7 chord. It still keeps D flat on top. And now I can move my bass. See? So again, once your melody is kind of giving you a hint at where the chord is, now you can add a better chord. You don't have to keep it here. You don't have to keep doing that D flat. It got you started and it can work. But you can say, okay, well, what else goes from the 1 to the 5? I'm going to the 1, 5, 1, 5. Now I start thinking, well, what can take me to the 5? You saw pattern paradise, circle of fifths. What leads to A flat on the circle of fifths? We covered this. E flat does. E flat is the 5 in the key of A flat. So, as a musician, you're always thinking, what's the 5th of where I'm going? Where's the 5th of the 5th of where I'm going? Where's the 5th of the 5th of the 5th? And I can always tell you, so instead of going from here to here, you can say, I wonder what would happen if I go from there to there. I can kind of keep it doesn't even sound bad just changing the bass. You can actually get away with that. But, I'd probably switch this to an E flat 7. See, and the key is my melody didn't change. So the same rules of keeping the melody on top apply. I've used what I know about patterns, and I've changed. Now I'm playing a chord progression. I'm playing a 2 to the 5. So melody can help you with harmony. Harmony can paint the picture as to, what kind of chord progressions are going on. So that's the idea. In the next segment, we'll get this thing going with a real song. So if you didn't get this all the way, don't worry. We'll reinforce it by showing you a song from scratch and how to play it if we were in your shoes. So we'll switch places and we'll be back.